guys! Today I've got another layout design to share with you that focuses on using 6x6 inch papers on full 12x12 inch layouts. This layout I actually started months ago, and then it got set aside and I rediscovered it a few days ago and thought I would come back to it and get it finished because it's a design I was really excited about and I wanted to see the finished result. The main design of the layout was mostly inspired by this stitched sunburst design. I had created this as a free downloadable stitching template for our We Create event in 2020. When I made the template, I was thinking it would be really cool to have this stitched sunburst with the middle circle area being some sort of detailed arrangement of pattern papers. After I picked out my photos, I decided to create a circle of wave strips for that middle piece. I love using 6-inch papers for designs like this where you've got lots of smaller pieces or strips because the patterns on 6-inch papers are smaller as well, so you can get away with cutting really small strips without losing that pattern. You can still clearly see what that pattern is, and that's one of the best things about using 6-inch papers. To begin, I'm going to add some watercolor on my cardstock background. I thought a subtle, misted, watercolor splattered look would go really well with the sun design and the stitching. Whenever I'm adding a larger amount of watercolor to my layout, I will first add a long strip of masking tape to each edge of the cardstock, making sure that every inch of that edge is covered. This helps the paper to not warp as much. I think there will always be some warping because you are applying water to the paper, but the masking tape helps a lot. The key is that you don't remove the masking tape until your paper is 100% completely dry. As you add your watercolor, you'll see the paper warp, but as it dries, you'll see it flatten back out. I decided to test out my Nuvo Light Mister bottle to apply the watercolor. I had never used these before, so I thought I would give it a try. I filled the bottle with some water and then added a few drops of yellow watercolor and shook the bottle to mix. I sprayed the watercolor in a circle to match the circle design of the sun. As I go along, I like to use a paper towel as I spray to help soak up any excess that is standing on top of the paper, just to keep the wetness of the paper to a minimum. The misted watercolor is really light, so now I'm going to go in with some darker splatters of watercolor. To do this, I load up my brush with paint and then flick the end to make it splatter on the cardstock. I'm using a darker yellow, a light orange, and a teeny tiny amount of a reddish coral color. To speed up the process of drying so I can remove the masking tape, I like to use my heat tool. It's much better to use that instead of sitting around waiting for it to dry on its own. After the paper is completely dry, I remove the masking tape. I pull the tape at a downward angle to prevent any tears in the paper. Now I'm going to use that stitching template to add my stitching. It's a 12 by 12 inch template, so I can secure it to my base paper with some masking tape on the edges. Then I get to work piercing the holes. I use a foam mat under my layout and a paper piercing tool to poke the holes. With all of the holes pierced, now I can start adding my stitching. I'm using a yellow embroidery floss to go with this sun design. I like to use 3 strands of floss, and I'm stitching using a back stitch. If you want to see my full process of hand stitching, I have a video that shows that, and I'll link to it down below. After all that stitching is done, I can start creating that center circle. I start with a 6-inch cardstock circle and several 3/4 inch wave strips, and I'm going to cover the circle with those strips. These wave strips are one of my favorite go-tos for water-themed layouts, and they are so easy to create with a circle punch. All you do is punch little half circles along one edge of the strip. To adhere the strips, I start at the top and work my way down. The waves are going to be slightly overlapped, so I start at the top so that the wave part of the strip is the part that ends up on top of the strip before it. I don't measure for perfection with the strips. I just make sure that you can't see any of the white cardstock between any of the strips. After all the strips are on the circle, I turn it over to the back side and cut the pieces that are hanging off the edge with scissors. I'm going to be adding some embellishments around the edge of the circle. So to help keep it all from kind of blurring together, I'm adding a white mat behind the wave strip circle. Then I adhere it to the center of the stitched sunburst. Next, I'm going to add my photos on the right edge of the circle. I want them overlapped onto the circle, but I don't want to cover up too much because I want that wave design to show. I've sanded the edges of the photos with a nail file to define the edges and help those photos stand out among all of those colors and patterns. Now I'm going to add my title. I used 2 stickers that came with this collection that I used, and I adhere them with foam adhesive. To embellish the design, I am adding several flower stickers tucked slightly under the circle. I also add in some seashells, starfish, word stickers, and a pineapple. Some of the details I add with foam adhesive to give some dimension to the design. For my journaling, I kept it really simple. I've made so many beach layouts, and these photos are actually left over from another layout I had created, so that story had been told. So I went with his name, the location, and the date. The last details are a few of my favorite finishing touches. I added a few enamel hearts and dots around that right edge, and then I used some old school stickles to add a few dots of glitter around the right edge. And that completes my layout. This concept of taking a shape and covering it in smaller pieces is a great way to use 6-inch papers, and it can be adapted and customized to many different shapes. You can use any shape for your base: a circle, a star, heart, hexagon, or triangle, just to name a few. And then you can cover that shape in many different designs. You can use straight strips, either horizontal or vertical. You can use decorative strips like I did with the waves. Other options would be scallop strips or chevron strips or maybe torn strips. You can also use smaller shapes to cover the large base shape or create a pattern of strips or shapes. There's really a lot you can do with this concept, and it creates a fun and unique look to a simple shape. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you next time.